Welcome back for part 6. Thanks for the feedback last time, guys. I did ask the question, do you like the format? So is it too detailed? And a lot of you said that you like it, so I'll just keep it the way it is for this series. If you're still watching this far in, obviously you're fairly interested in what I'm doing, whether you're doing a similar swap or you're just interested in general. This content can be quite dry to watch. So I'm making another series at the moment about a turbo swap, and what I'm trying to do is make it a little bit easier to watch, basically, so things progress a little bit quicker. Some of the smaller details are left out, just because it's not really, I'm not saying that this project's groundbreaking, but it's not very well documented, whereas something like a turbo swap, there's about 1,000 videos out there on that one, so look out for that one. In this video, again, a bit more about the positioning. I look at how the shock interacts with both the chassis and the subframe, so just the clearance there. I actually weld up the cross member, and I've got a small segment in there about the differences between the subframe that I've chosen to use and the earlier style one. So again, guys, enjoy. So this is just an overhead view of where these front mount points turned out in comparison with the rail. It's a bit of a pain in the ass because they're kind of half on the rail. I'll just show you. So they're just overlapping the rail there. So we're going to have to cut some of the rail out to obviously clear the bolt head. My plan is basically a square piece of 4mm plate, send the bolt through the middle of it, and then obviously just clearance the rail. Yeah, clearance the rail for the bolt head. And then we'll bolt the piece of plate to the bottom of this, and then tap it in place, and then box it in when it's on the car. So this is what I was talking about earlier with the subframe being closer. I know you can't see from this angle, but this distance in here is about 2mm before this touches this. And compare that to the other side. Again, I know it's not the best angle, but that's a good 10mm. Yeah, 10 to 12mm. I'm not sure if all cars are like this or if it's just this one. It is interesting though that some of you can see this is obviously mounted further back on this side than it is to the other side, and you can see evidence of that just by how, like, the distance between this and this jack point and the jack point to this. Like, if you compare both sides, you can clearly see that this one's mounted further back on this side and further forward on that side, so I'm not too concerned about the disparity of this distance between the two sides. Another thing I've had to pay attention to while playing with the height of the subframe is obviously the clearance, because we clearance the rails. In here, we've still got clearance. I mean, this is a ruler, I don't know, 1mm thick. It's close. I'd say there's 1mm on one side and 2mm on the other. So the profile of the rail is actually curved. We should be able to get a little bit more clearance by massaging it with a hammer just before we weld in the filler panel. So they worked out quite well. So that's just got a level sitting on the frontmost mount point. It's perfectly level, and under here we've just got our 4mm clearance, so just enough to get those brackets in. So that's pretty much as close as we can get it to the car, while still obviously keeping the bubble in the lines. Okay, this is the ride height that it sits at. I've actually put one of my coilovers in the car. It's actually wound out all the way, so it's got about 25-30 mil engagement on the threads there. So this is pretty much as high as I can sit the car. So when it's got some weight on it, obviously it will settle into place, but it's ballpark at the moment. It could go either way. So I'll just take the wheel off and show you. It actually turned out a lot better than I thought it would. So my original plan was basically convert the coilovers to pillow ball style, like they use in the front. Any kind of McPherson strut that requires misalignment, and these are obviously these coilovers. They are made for S14. They're actually Silk Road coilovers. Originally, I think the rates were 8 in the front, 7 in the rear. I think I ordered 8.6. It's got a 7 on it at the moment. Let's get a bit of a closer look. So down the bottom there, this one actually has, this strut top has been re-drilled for R31. I think they're the same as S12s and old Z31s and stuff. They use a 3-bolt top hat. They moved to a 2-bolt in the S13. This one, I know you can't see it, but there's one here and one here, and the studs are actually sitting in the holes. So it's touching on this side, and on this side it's about maybe 20 mil. So it's sitting hard against this face, and it's got 20 mil on that side. So that's easily going to work with a like a camber top style that has a pillow ball in it. So the take up the misalignment worked out a lot better than I thought it would. It's pretty much almost perfect. Here's a bit of a shot from the side. You can see this, it's not quite vertical. I think they were pretty close to vertical in the S14s, but that's really close without having to modify the strut tower. That's awesome. So looking straight down the shock, this is just a bit of a idea about the clearance between the upper control arm and the shock body itself. So it's a good 30 mil. Maybe 25 mil. It's a bit hard to test, obviously without taking the spring out, how the arm moves through the motion, but I'm pretty sure that should be okay. If not, we might need to modify or buy an aftermarket arm. One thing I haven't really talked much about is the difference between this style of subframe and the earlier one. So this is actually, I guess you could call it the second generation. The first being the first cars to come out with this style of IRS were the S13, the A31 Sphero, C33, and I'm forgetting one, the R32 obviously. So a few differences are the excluding GTRs, because GTRs they're almost always wider. The subframe is a little bit narrower, and you can see that in the track specs. So anyone looking to use one of these IRS setups to swap into anything, the Series 1, it is slightly narrower, so narrower track. The Silvias run a similar handbrake setup to the 31, so cable to the caliper, and the cable acts on the caliper, whereas the Skylines and the more up-spec models, they have an internal drum inside the disc. Another difference is this angle of this pin here. On the earlier subframes, it is more angled in towards the center of the car. One of the reasons that I'm running this knuckle, other than the fact that it came with the 2nd gen subframe, it better suits the 31 mounting location. 1st gen, the shock is actually a lot shorter as well. Another thing that they did change between the 1st and the 2nd gen is the lower control arm pickup point. So I can't remember, it's one of these two that they did, and that affects lift off, oversteer and traction, all different things. Another difference was the mounting points are obviously different. The 2nd gen, they're actually, I can't remember, it's like 10mm, 20mm further apart, so you can actually install a 2nd gen subframe in a 1st gen car. So put a, like, these things came out in everything pretty much 1993 onwards, Nissan real drive, all the way through till early 2000s. So you can get adapter bushings that you press in, and obviously they're solid, and you can run a 2nd gen subframe in a S13 or a R32. Obviously you want to retain the factory knuckles so that you still get that correct angle. I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I think that this is a copy of a Porsche rear end. Late 80s Porsche, and at the time obviously the Japs were copying the Germans quite a bit with engineering. There's a lot of parallels between the BMWs and Skylines of the era. These are actually made of what I'm assuming is cast steel. Of the ones that I've mentioned, this style on the newer one and the more angled style on the version 1, there was also an aluminium knuckle made. The aluminium, I think it first came out on the R32 GTR and also the 300ZX. It was used on all GTRs, and it was also used on R34s as well. So it's just a little bit different of a mount setup down the bottom. Instead of having a pin that it mounts on, this part here is slightly twisted, and it has like a fork that goes over and a bolt that goes through. They must have deemed it to be better by the end if they put it on the 34, and obviously putting it on the GTR and not the base models. While we're here, I might as well mention they did change between the 1st gen and the 2nd gen. They did change the way that the diff mounts to the subframe. You can run a 2nd gen diff in a 1st gen subframe. You just need to change the diff cover. So they had a 4-bolt in the 1st gen, and they use a 2-bolt just to support the rear housing of the diff in this one. Matching drive shafts to these things. The easiest way is just to buy a whole complete rear end, and then you know it works together. There is a few different length drive shafts, obviously with the varying widths. The drive shafts themselves actually have, I think all the outers are the same, but the inners, there are some differences with, I think there are some differences with the splines, but there is definitely some differences with the flanges that the drive shafts mount to the diff with. Since all the componentry that I'm using on this did come from, like these control arms and everything, they came from an R33, so they use a viscous style LSD, the same as the 32. The 34, there's actually 2 series of R34. I'm not quite sure if the 1st gen used the same as this or if they use a clutch style. As far as I'm aware, all GTRs use clutch style LSD, but the 2nd generation R34, like the S15, use the it's like a Torsen style. Not the best for getting sideways, but way better for grip. So the standard 31, obviously it runs a hard line for the rear brakes, comes up through here, hits a soft line like a flex that goes from about here obviously onto the whole axle assembly, and then it's hard lines out to the calipers. I've actually got the distribution block here from a 33, so I'll end up mounting that around here somewhere. The 31 uses bubble flares for the brake lines. All the import stuff uses double flares, so I'll just end up re-flaring this solid line, come straight into here, and then solid line out to each wheel arch. And then I've got some braided brake lines to go from there to the calipers. The handbrake cables themselves actually look pretty long, so whether I route those directly from this wheel straight across or I end up crossing them over, we'll see how that works out on the car. I was going to make up these front brackets on this car because of the differences where these are, these support pieces from the rail to the sill. They're a little bit different. I don't know if that's the same on my car, so I don't want to make up the brackets for this. It doesn't fit, have to modify them. What I'll end up doing is punching a bit of hole in this rail for the head of the bolt and putting it on a plate, and obviously just reinforcing that plate to as much of the car as I can. So I'd love to be able to weld the sides onto these as well as the rails and then box it in from there. So I'm going to wait until I've got it on my car to do that. Alright, so I'll take all this side off now that I'm confident that this is going to work, and we'll get to trimming that rear box section so that I can get these bolts on for the upper control arm mounts, and then we'll weld it all together. So what I've done here is just cut this straight across here and beveled it down to as low as I could get it in this corner, so that this is pretty much, yeah, it's not twisted at all. It's like comes straight along and then it comes down. This is at the max adjustment. That way, it's fiddly. You can do it, but it's too fiddly. I don't like it. So what I'm going to do is chop this piece again and increase the angle. This is turning out to be a pain in the ass. If I chopped this side pretty much as close as I could get it so that it meets up at the bottom, short of just finishing it straight on, which would look terrible, not be the best for strength. I think I'm going to have to just bash this little bit in here. I don't know how it's going to go, but we'll have a look. This is what I ended up with. It was just fouling, having this piece. So all I've done is come as far this way until I hit the plate. There's probably about 5mm between the edge of this and where the subframe bush actually sits. So I've just come to the edge of the weld, straight line down to the edge of the rail here, and then tried to project that through to this side, and that just meant that I just had to bash in this corner here. It's no big deal, you know, went easy, took me about a couple of minutes, but that's all going to get covered up, welded in anyway. There's not really any way around it. It's no big deal, it'll turn out fine. I'm not expecting to have this problem on the other side. Just the way the rails sit, the distance between here and the outside face here, it's actually a lot shorter on this side than it is on the other side. So I'll do what I originally did, just chop it at the weld, fillet it down to here, and we'll see how it looks. If I was to do the whole thing again, I'd probably use a combination of the subframe bushes that I've used. So I'd use the lowering ones in the front where I need the clearance, and I'd just use the normal solid subframe bushes in the rear. That way you wouldn't have all these issues with the clearance, obviously, because it's 10mm higher. And then what I'd end up doing is just actually putting this whole thing closer to the car 10mm to obviously compensate so it's still in the same position, and then you could just do a nice little a nice transition how it was before without having to bash the rail. Looking good. Do the same thing on the other side, and we'll see how we go. Okay guys, so this is how it looks in the end. Well, not quite the end. What I'm going to do next is basically just weld up all the seams on the outside,
Probably mount the subframe to it first, just to hold it in place. I'll probably just spot weld the inside. Probably just seam weld the inside. I'll try to jump around, try not to warp it too much, but yeah, it's looking pretty good. The fit up's not bad. I had to redo this side because when I made sure, checked for clearance, it wasn't quite pushed down enough for that rear cam bolt. But yeah, so I'll weld it all up now and we'll see how it goes.
So I've welded it all up. It's looking pretty good. What I'm going to do is cut it free from the car, and then I'm going to put some seam welds on the inside, and then I'll tidy it all up. Alright, so I've got it mounted back in the subframe. Obviously the subframe's out of the car. I'm going to lay down some tacks inside and just give you a bit of a look of what it looks like at the moment. There was a bit of penetration, but nothing a few tacks can't sort out. Going to go ahead now and tidy this up a bit. That's it all ground back. It came up pretty good. Hope the focus works this time. It was jumping around a bit before. Yeah, so we're getting real close now. The next episode, I promise, we'll be chopping things on my actual car. So no more of the dummy car. It's the real thing from now on. It will happen pretty quick. I've also, as I mentioned earlier, I've got another video series on the go as well, so my next upload will be the first of that one, so look out for that. And that's just putting a single turbo on an RB26. Definitely not going to give up on this series. I've filmed it all. I've probably got enough content for another 2 or 3 more videos, so I'm just going to try and alternate and just try and get a bit more interest in the channel. Thanks for all the support, and if you do watch these videos and you do like them, and if you haven't already, remember to subscribe. At the time of filming this, I think I'm up to 90, so almost at 100. So yeah, thanks for your support, guys. Cheers.